Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Now, what we're looking at today is we are looking at the completion of our primary text, but we need to go through another tinier text to give a little bit of adab, because Imam Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn Hussein al-Ajurri, rahimahullah, he discussed most of the information in a general fashion. And so the Imam that I told you about, Imam Taqiyuddin al-Futuhi, rahimahullah, he's discussed the issues regarding the touching of the Qur'an by the junub and the one who's having monthly cycle. He's discussed that in a little bit more detail, so we have a little bit more fruit. So going into it, I want to make sure that everyone is in the know regarding the matter, because it's really important. Now, where we stopped off at, if I'm correct, is where Abu Hurairah narrated that the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah listens the most to a prophet with a beautiful voice reciting the Qur'an clearly and with ghunnah, and that's page 125. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I believe that's where we stopped at. Okay. Now, we're now on page 126. We are set to finish today, inshallah. Now, Brother Kashif, could you please read from the author, Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn Hussein al-Ajurri, it said.
I, the author Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn Hussein al-Ajurri, would like to also say that the one who recites the Qur'an should be longing and also mournful, and to think of weeping when reciting, and his heart should be humble as well. Let him reflect upon the promises and warnings mentioned in it, so that this might bring about longing and sorrow. Have you not heard the description that Allah gave to those who have this attribute and quality? Did He not tell us of their virtue? Allah sent down the best of speech. This is a book that has allegories and is oft repeated. It causes the skin of those who fear their Lord to shiver, and their hearts to indeed soften to the remembrance of Allah. Right after this, He then condemns those who listen to the Qur'an when their hearts are not humbled. He says, "Are you then amazed at this speech? You laugh at it, and you do not weep, wasting your time and your life in vanities. So it is more befitting that the one who recites the Qur'an does so with the slow measures, so as to understand and learn it. This is just as Allah the Exalted has said, recite the Qur'an slowly and with attentive mind." The commentary on this means to recite slowly, methodically and clearly. You should therefore understand from this that when he recites it slowly and clearly, those listening take heed and can benefit from it as well, for he will have recited as he was commanded. Allah the Exalted has also said, "This is a Qur'an that we have divided up and given it so that you might recite it at intervals and gradually."
Okay, now, quick and important point. When we're looking, may I just borrow this one? Use it as a source. Now, when we're looking at the text, one of the things that the Imam has told us is he quoted this ayah, وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا. Recite it slowly and with an attentive mind. Now, the text here states and uses the word tartil. Tartil is the recitation. You have a number of areas where, when we're discussing the Qur'an, one of the words that will come up is tartil. Tartil in Arabic, and this has actually been mentioned in the Qur'an. So when Allah says, وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا, you have to do it that way, because it's a command. So recite it with tartil. Tartil. Or tartilun. Okay? In short, it means to recite it with tajweed. In short, that's literally, tartil is referring to tajweed. However, it's also referring to reciting it with tajweed, and also doing so in a methodical fashion, not fast. Right? It's too fast. Reciting it with tajweed, methodically, carefully. Not like machines or puppets or drag racers. Slowly, accurately, correctly. Because the quicker you increase the volume and the speed on the Qur'an, the more likely you are to make a mistake. And the more damage that you do, especially if you haven't learned how the letters are pronounced, you stand a greater possibility of really doing some damage in tajweed. Now, some slaves of Allah, maybe that's the only way they've learned. But we can't do that. So it's the recitation with tajweed. It's the accuracy. And then number 3, slowly. Not rattling. Not with ajab. Not with ajab, where you're reciting so quickly. Just need to get through this. That's not what Qur'an is about. And you find the people that do that, I found whenever I listen to the people that do that, they always make a huge amount of mistakes. Because they're trying, I've got to get through this, I've got to get through, and they mess up. They recite Ahmed Tabi'i as just one haraka, when it's supposed to be 2. It's just all these type of things that go with the accurate recitation of the Qur'an. This is a Qur'an that we've divided up and given it so that you might recite it at intervals and gradually. Okay, at intervals and gradually not only means the fact that Allah sent the Qur'an down at particular sections, but what happened is it's also been given to be recited at portions in time. So the juz is recited at portions in time. The juz is recited. The hizb is recited. The manzil is done. The sab'a, the ruba, the nisf. All these things are given at intervals so you recite it accurately. It is important. Please continue, brother.
The commentary to this means so that it might be recited at intervals in front of people or alone. It was narrated to us by Abu Muhammad Yahya ibn Muhammad, who said it was narrated to us by Abu Khattab Ziyad ibn Yahya, who said it was narrated to us by Malik ibn Su'ayr, who said it was narrated to us by Ibn Abi Layla, who said it was narrated to us by Al-Haqiq from Miqsam, from Ibn Abbas, who recited the ayah, recite the Qur'an slowly and with attentive mind. He said this means that you need to make it clear and slow.
Okay? So, it's clear, it's mubin, and it's slow. You need to make sure that when you recite, it's clear and it's slow. The people that recite quickly and fast, and they try to get through it to finish it, they make mistakes. A lot. And they mess up a lot. Because they're trying to go so quickly. But it's when you slow down that we can actually hear you. And we can actually listen to you properly. So when you slow down, we can actually hear what you're saying. Just the same thing with anything. If someone's speaking really fast in a crisis situation, you need for them to slow down. You need for them to slow down and to explain to you, tell me again, say it slowly, so I can understand. The Qur'an is like that as well. It's not like any other book that you'll read. You can read a lot of different books and just read them any old way. But the Qur'an has its rules, it has its punctuation, it has tajweed, it has its principles that surround it. You have to make sure that when you recite it, that you do so accurately. All right, Brother Asif, could you please read the next section?
It was narrated to us by Jafar ibn Muhammad as-Sindali, who said it was narrated to us by Abu Bakr ibn Zanjawi, who said it was narrated to us by Abdul Razzaq, who said it was narrated to us by Sufyan, who said it was narrated to us by Ubayd al-Muqattib from Mujahid, who recited the words of the mighty and majestic. This Qur'an that we have divided up and given it so that you might recite it at intervals and gradually. He then said, the meaning of this is that you recite it at intervals. Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sindali narrated to us and said, it was narrated to us by Al-Hasan ibn Muhammad az-Zafarani, who said it was narrated to us by Ismail ibn Ulayya, who said it was narrated to us by Ayub from Abu Jamrah al-Dhubi, who said, I said to Ibn Abbas that I was a quick reciter who could complete the entire Qur'an in 3 days. He said, if I were to recite Surah Baqarah in one night, thinking and pondering on it deeply and reciting it with its rules, it would be better to me than reciting as you do.
Okay. Now this is important. Someone says, "Oh, I can recite the Qur'an in 3 days and get it done, and do this and do that." So what? Have you paid any attention to the rules of tajweed? I mean, Surah Al-Baqarah. If you recite Surah Al-Baqarah with all of its rules accurately, slowly, and not racing like you're desperately trying to run from a burglar or a killer with a gun, if you recite it accurately, as it should be recited, it will take you about 2 hours. It will take you about 2 hours. Because you have to think, Surah Al-Baqarah is running through 2.5 juz. Surah Al-Baqarah runs through 2.5 juz. It's juz alif lam mim, and juz sayaqulu sufaha, and juz tilka al-rusul. It's running through those juz. Now, if you recite a juz of Qur'an, if you recite it accurately, as you're supposed to be, it will take you 1 hour. It will take you 1 hour to do it. Those that review and go over it further, it may take longer because they're reviewing and going over what they have. We have to peel out the mistakes and everything else. But in general, when you're just reading from the Mus'haf, it will take you 1 hour. Someone says, "Oh yes, have you read through your juz?" "Oh yes, I read through it about 25 minutes. You couldn't have read through juz in 25 minutes. You literally couldn't have read. You just breathed it. You couldn't have read through it. It's like when you hear about the people that eat huge amounts of food in short periods of time. You say, "You didn't eat that. You inhaled it." Because you couldn't have eaten it in such a short period of time. You literally inhaled it. You didn't eat that. It's the same thing with the speech of Allah. You have to be the same way. Okay? Brother Waqar, if you could read from the section. On page 129, it was narrated to us by Jafar.
It was narrated to us by Jafar, who said it was narrated to us by Abu Bakr ibn Zanjawi. This bit has been read.
It hasn't.
It was narrated to us by Muhammad ibn Yusuf, who said it was narrated to us by Sufyan ibn Ubayd al-Muqattib, who said Mujahid was asked about the man who recited Surah Al-Baqarah and Surah Al-Imran, and comparing him with the man who recited Surah Al-Baqarah in one sitting and in their bowing, prostration and sitting in prayer. It was then asked which of the two is superior. Ibn Abbas remarked, "The one who recited Al-Baqarah alone." He then recited what Allah said, "This is a Qur'an that we have divided up and given it so that you might recite it at intervals and gradually. I, the author Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn al-Husayn al-Ajuri, will say that all of that which I have gathered together is necessary for the people of Qur'an to put into practice so that they hold onto and do not let go of that which they were enjoined to do regarding all of the behavior and etiquettes. This is also designed to keep them away from what is disliked for them from the earthly manners and behavior. Allah is the most generous. May He guide us and them to the path of right guidance."
Now, I say in closing this program, these are all the etiquettes of the Qur'an that have been given to us in a short and summarized fashion. Now, with regard to that, we have the other text that I had mentioned to you. The other text should be in your books at the front. Okay? And this text is half in Arabic, half in English. Okay? Half in Arabic, half in English. Okay? And what I've given you on the English side, it states the commentary on the uttermost boundary of all intents by Imam Taqiyuddin al-Futuhi, died 972 AH, the particulars of the matters of knowledge in the uttermost boundary, in the commentary of the uttermost boundary. That is the commentary by Imam Mansur ibn Yunus al-Buhuti, rahimahullah. Both of them were Egyptians. The first died 972 AH, the second died 1051 AH. They were both Azharis. Okay? And Azhar meant something. Okay? They're both Azharis. Now, what he speaks about, because I've included just for the barakah of it, I just put the Arabic on one side, on the first side, and the English on the other side, just for the barakah of it. Okay, because Allah has blessed them to write so much about the Qur'an in regards to etiquettes. Now, what are the things that Imam Taqiyuddin mentions to us, he says, quote, so the one that is in a state of impurity, and this is on page 150, you should see the marking at the bottom. So the one that is in a state of impurity, it is forbidden for such a one prayer, tawaf, touching the mushaf, part of it, even the pages and its corners with commentary, with his hand or other parts of his body without any barrier. It is not impermissible to carry it with a strap, in a bag, or a suitcase. Okay? These are general principles that we've already gone over. So the generalities of the affair are that if one is in a state of impurity, they would not touch the mushaf directly. Either its cover, its binding, spine, the pages where the writing is, and so on and so forth. Now Imam Buhuti rahimahullah, he says about this, he says, so it is impermissible for the one without wudu or in a state of junub with the ability to purify himself to perform prayer due to the hadith of Ibn Umar where the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah does not accept a prayer without purification or any charity, it's coming from exaggeration. This has been narrated by all of the seven, but the exception of Al-Bukhari. Okay, now before we go on, what he means by all of the seven. You have certain language that's used. When scholars say this was narrated by the six, okay, this is Al-Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawood, At-Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, and An-Nasa'i. These are the six. Okay, these are the six. So when people talk about collections, and they usually say the Sahih Sitta, the Sahih Sitta, Sahih Sitta, the six Sahih ones. They mean Al-Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawood, Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, and Nasa'i. Now the ulama also sometimes talk about another one which is called As-Sab'a. As-Sab'a, or As-Sab'u. Okay? The seven. Okay? Now this includes the six and what? The Musnad. Musnad of Imam Ahmad. So sometimes you'll have scholars saying, and it's good to get this language down because as we go through books and go through things, this language will get used frequently. Okay, so the Sahih means if someone says the hadith is in the Sahih, there's no really way to get around it. No one can say, oh, it's weak. How can it be weak? It's in all six of the major ones that the ulama are agreed upon. Or it's in the Sab'ah, except for such and such. So it's not in Bukhari, but it's in all these other ones. Ahmed, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, Nasa'i. Okay? The Imam then says, this ruling counts for the compulsory prayer and the optional prostration of recitation, the prostration of gratefulness, the funeral prayer. This means as well then, if you don't have wudu or you're in a state of junub, okay, you cannot do optional prayers, compulsory prayers, the prostration of recitation, okay, which is the sajdatul tilawa, okay, the prostration of gratefulness, sajdatul shukr, okay, and then you have salatul janazah. You can't do those if you're in that condition. The one who should pray in a state of impurity is not an unbeliever. Okay, so if someone prayed, didn't know, and said, I had no idea, or I know that I should, and prayed without wudu, and didn't know what they were doing, they just said, I'm just going to pray as it is, I don't know. And they pray. That one is not a kafir. Why is that an important point to stress? Because someone who knowingly contradicts the revealed law with purposeful intent is a kafir. They knowingly do so, they are a kafir. If the ulama have stated, if someone knowingly knows, they knowingly contradict the revealed law, and it's something that is known from the religion by necessity, Like, for example, they know that Hajj is something that's compulsory. And they say, oh, I don't have to. Or I'll do it when I'm ready. Or people delay things that are compulsory without right. The ulama are agreed, this person, it's not us that says it, but the ulama are agreed, this person can be called a kafir. That's not even denying it. That's just saying, oh yeah, I'll delay it. This one is a kafir. What would you delay it for? If you have the means and everything else, why are you delaying it without sound excuse? This one is a kafir. Okay? So what the Shaykh is saying is, the one who's praying, because it may be that he doesn't know about tayammum. It may be he's a new Muslim. It may be he has absence of water and he doesn't have anything for tayammum, so he just thinks, I'll pray as I am. He's trying to fulfill the command out of fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And even though he's incorrect in what he's doing, he's not an unbeliever. In fact, he's to be commended for trying to carry out the revealed law. Then he says, it is also impermissible for the one in a state of impurity to make tawaf, compulsory or optional, due to the statement of the Prophet ﷺ. Tawaf around the house is prayer, with the exception that Allah has allowed speaking in it. This was narrated by Imam al-Shafi'i. So, if someone's making tawaf, or they want to make tawaf and they don't have wudu, you must have wudu because of this hadith. Tawaf is salah. The only exception is you can talk. So you'll be in tawaf, and you'll be looking, saying, oh, where's brother so-and-so? Where's our leader of our troop? Oh, he's over there, by the light. And so you'll say, we're here, and indicate it. That's permitted. Or if you say, how many shot do we have left? Because once you start, and you get to the green light, and you put the green light on your right, sometimes the third shot in, unless someone's counting for you, you forget. So there you are, from Dhuhr all the way to Isha. You've done way more than 7. Because you keep forgetting. You say, okay, I'm going to do 7 shot. Then you think, wait, I'm not sure. This must be number 3. But I can't be really sure. Just start again. There's the light. Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. Make the talbiyah. Start again. Okay? So it's important to understand that you have wudu for these things. Furthermore, it is impermissible to touch the mushaf or part of it, even if one is small. Due to the statement of the glorified and exalted, none should touch it except the purified. Surah Al-Waqi'ah, the 56th Surah, Ayah 78. There is also the hadith of Abdullah bin Amr bin Hazm from his father, from his grandfather, who said that the Prophet ﷺ wrote to the king of Yemen in a letter that had in it, none should touch the Qur'an except the purified. This is collected by Al-Athram, Al-Nasa'i, Al-Daraqutni, and also used by Imams Ahmed and Malik. Now this is important. So this is the Mus'haf. There's no translation, there's no commentary. Okay? One who is in the state of junub cannot touch the Mus'haf. Okay? Not the pages of it, not the binding, not the spine, nothing. Because you're in a state of junub. If you've broken your wudu, you cannot touch this if you do not have wudu. If you have no wudu or you're junub, you cannot touch this. Okay? Even in the case of the binding, then cover of a mushaf, it is not permissible, as all of this falls under that which is called the mushaf. And the same prohibition counts for selling it. So it's impermissible to sell them, which he threw this in as a caveat. You can't touch them, you can't do this, can't do that. You can't sell them because it's cheapening the speech of Allah. And that's one fatwa from the ulama. That's not a consensus issue. There is a difference of opinion about that. For selling it. So whether he touches it with his hand or any other thing that makes direct contact, then he has touched it. But if someone touches it with a barrier, then it's not impermissible, as touching is only when there is no barrier. It is not impermissible to carry it with a strap, in a bag or suitcase when one has not touched it. The reason for this is that the prohibition has to do with touching and not carrying. So if someone puts on a state of, if someone puts on a pair of gloves and they are holding the mushaf, or what's happened with me when I've been at home and I've had to put it away and I'm looking and I can find a clean towel, I've had to enshroud it in the towel and put it up on the shelf because I don't have wudu at that point, and the Qur'an is worthy of your respect. So it's because of this reason. So if someone is looking, what page was I in? And they put on gloves and they look, And they say, yes, I know what page I'm in. Because there's a barrier, there's no longer direct skin to text contact that is valid. Okay, according to the statement from Futuhi. And I mentioned that yesterday. Now, on page 151, because we're on page 150, okay? Brother, could you read the above text before the commentary?
Likewise, the turning of the pages or using a stick is permitted. The same thing holds for touching the books of commentary and the text of recitation that one is working on. And the young child can touch the board that he has written on some portions of the Qur'an. It is impermissible to touch the mushaf with anything that is najis. Travel with it to Darul al-Harb, ship it there, or any books that have any knowledge or details mentioned of the Qur'an.
Okay, so likewise, the turning of the pages, so if you're turning the pages, or using a stick, or you're using a marker to turn the pages like this is permitted. The same thing holds for touching the books of commentary and text of recitation that one's working on. The young child can touch the board that is written on some portions of the Qur'an, because in a lot of places where the Muslims memorize the Qur'an, you give the child the board, or you give a section of some paper that has their section written on it. Like let's say it's Juz' Amma, and you give him a section of it. You say, okay, we're on Juz' Amma, go ahead and give us Idha Shamsu Kuwirat, and it's got the whole page on there. And he reads it. It's permitted for him to do that, but even with that being said, he should still, where the text is, let's say, he should still look at holding on to it around the bottoms or the edges, out of ta'aleem for the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When it was allowed to him, he should still show ta'aleem and hold on to the edges or along the sides and not point at the text itself. And that works well for little kids who sort of struggle with wudu. When you're 4 years old, you've just learned about wudu and how your body works, things go wrong. Things go wrong. And sometimes it happens to where if you've got 40, 50 kids in a class, you feel shy to ask the teacher and say, oh, I need to go and make wudu, as you just did. So rather than to have to go through that, you have your boards, you have your pages, and this is what teachers will often do, you have your pages. Then when they get a bit older, when they become mumayyiz is around 7, they become mumayyiz, then you give them a mushaf. And you say, okay, because now they have better presence of mind where they can hold it and stop the wind from escaping, or they know to make wudu again. They have better presence of mind when they're 7 and 9, when they become a ghulam. Their presence of mind is there. Okay. As for impermissible to touch the mushaf with anything that is najis, okay, you can't touch it with anything that's ruled as najis. You can't do that. Travel with it to Darul Harb. Darul Harb is any place where the Muslims and the Kuffar are in active combat for the supremacy or control over an area. Okay, if there's a massive, like Chechnya, there's a massive struggle there in Grozny and those other areas for who has control. What's one of the first things when that happened? What did the Muslims do? They removed the mushafs from the masjid and they moved them to somewhere that wasn't under that classification, because this is some place where the Muslims are and the Kuffar are in jockeying positions to gain control or mastery over land. And what's the things the unbelievers do when they come across things that are sacred to other people? They destroy them. They deface them. They damage them. Okay? So you take steps so that doesn't happen. Okay? Now for the commentary, okay, Brother Waqar, if you could read from "It is not permissible for someone."
It is not impermissible for someone who requires wudu or ghusl that he turn the pages of the mushaf with an object, a stick or something such as that. It is likewise permitted for such a one to touch books of commentary and similar things like books of fiqh, messages or documents with ayat from the Qur'an, as this one is not touching the mushaf. Also, it is permitted to cough the text where there are things of Allah mentioned in them, even if it is a text of today's Torah, Injil, and also Tawheed with verses from the Qur'an. The same holds true if someone like this were to touch clothing that have ayat of the Qur'an in them, silver that has been embossed with Qur'an. It is also permissible to help the small child by allowing him to touch the board that has Qur'an in it which does not have the writing on it. and he is touching the blank portions.
Now here's a question. It says clothing with Qur'an written on it. What type of clothing's got Qur'an written on it? Think about this. What type of clothing has Qur'an written on it? Think. The kiswa. The kiswa. Now you think about the kiswa makers, the people that are there. Remember, every day at any one time on earth, someone's in the process of either making a new kiswa, repairing one that's been taken off, touching up the ayat on the kiswa. At any one time, someone's working on those ancient curtains that are to be refitted with new curtains as replacement on the Kaaba. So, if you have to work with those curtains, and there's ayat all over those curtains, aren't there? You can see there's ayat all over them. Baqarah, Al Imran, you have Ayatul Kursi, all different types of ayat. Now, if you say these 50 guys that are working, listen, you've got to have wudu at all times. Is it the mushaf? Well, no. Okay. Why do we have to have wudu? Because you have to have proof to tell someone that something's haram or halal. You have to have a proof. So these people, when they're working overtime, but the situation changes though, when they're actually going to put the kiswa on, they're coming into Al-Masjid al-Haram, and they're going to refit it on Al-Masjid al-Haram. Now what those guys do before they go in is they make a very, very strong ghusl. They were speaking about this on television where they use like a hose, a garden hose, to make ghusl, to make sure every area was got before they come into the masjid with the kiswa. Then when they're there, even though they're barefoot, they still wear like coverings over their feet respectfully because they're on the roof of the Kaaba and fitting the kiswa. I mean, the attitude that they have the whole time that they're there is different to the attitude that other normal people have. They have a totally different attitude. If you ever have the opportunity, and you can go online and find it, look at the changing of the kiswa at the Kaaba. And when you see those guys, even though they're standing up straight, they're still slightly stooped on purpose because it's the severity of what they're doing. And they don't, because the Kaaba, the word Kaaba in Arabic is feminine, and so they treat the Kaaba like a lady. They never leave her fully naked. They always throw over one of the pieces of the kiswa, and then they cut the straps to the old one under and let that fall. They never leave her fully naked. Well, the Saudi authorities do sometimes, but that's a different issue, isn't it? We're talking about the people who look after the Kaaba, that are proper custodians. So it's the respect that's due to the Kaaba. So these people, when you're looking at clothing, all right, this is what it is. Brother, please continue reading.
He should not the section of his body that might have any najasa on and purified, and he should not touch the mushaf before he has completed purification. It is impermissible to touch the books of Qur'an or dhikr with something najas or writing them with something najas. It was said by Imam Ibn Aqil, indeed the one who intended to write the Qur'an with najas and set out to do so should and he has done this with attempt to disrespect it, then it is compulsory to kill this individual. Someone who went to write something with najasa or write on it or in it with something najas, then the area affected should be cleaned and washed off.
Okay, so someone intentionally says, I'm going to go ahead and put something disrespectful of the Qur'an. I'm going to go and kick the speech of Allah. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. That person has to be killed. Imam Ibn Aqil says, this person's got to be killed. He wants to write down something najis, some of the speech of Allah, write something disrespectful about the Qur'an, this individual has to be killed. Why? Because he's a kafir. That's why. You have to understand the magnanimity with which the speech of Allah is treated. That's why it's not an exaggeration when you see it, oh, well, it's in the highest point of the house, why has it had this, why has it had... Because the respect of the speech of Allah is there. The respect is there. So you are to treat it respectfully. Now, please continue, brother, reading.
It is impermissible to touch the mushaf with the part of the body that is najas, as this has been discussed and mentioned by Imam Ibn Muflih, who said, the same ruling counts for writing or touching the dhikr of Allah with something najas. It is not impermissible to touch these books with something pure when there is no najasa connected to it. It is impermissible to travel with a mushaf to Darul Harb due to the narration on the topic, and it is impermissible to ship it there or books of knowledge that have Qur'an written in them. It is impermissible to throw it around in boxes, lean on it, fling it or sell it. Imam Ahmed says of selling books of hadith, if someone may resort to theft in order to obtain one, then there is no harm in that.
Okay, now think about this then. Someone is desperately in need of information on the speech of Allah. They resort to theft to try to get it. He says, listen, just give it to them. Just give it to them. They think you're going to resort to theft. Just give it to them. This is why, if you have a masjid, you shouldn't be afraid if it's open 24 hours. The only issues you'd have to worry about would be vandalism. Or, well, what are they going to steal? Well, the speech of Allah. If they're that brave to go in there and they want the speech of Allah, subhanAllah, what can we do? They want to read the Qur'an. What can we do? Leave a box that says, take these. If you're going to steal, take these. Help them. And this is the whole point of when you're looking at the speech of Allah, how it should be treated, how you should understand it. This is how we are to be. Now, we're on page 152. Okay? Brother Rashid, if you could read from the top before the commentary.
It is impermissible to write Qur'an with anything that is low in value or despicable. It is dislike to stretch one's legs towards it, to put one's back towards it, to write it or inscribe it with gold and silver, although it is permissible to perfume it.
Okay, so it's impermissible to write the Qur'an with anything that is low in value or despicable. Anything that's low value or despicable that you wouldn't write with. You don't do that. It's just like to stretch one's legs towards it. That's accidentally. You're stretching and your legs happen to be in the same direction. You see, to write it or to one's back towards it, meaning with purposeful intent, as the Imam will clarify. So if you intentionally do so, purposeful intent or on a regular basis, this is disliked. Because again, this is the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These men aren't Pakistanis. These are Egyptians. So it's not a Pakistani thing that we say, oh, that's just some Asian guys in a room. No, these guys are Egyptians through and through. This can't be an Egyptian thing. This is a Muslim thing. You don't do this. You respect the speech of Allah. You treat it with reverence. So when you read the speech of Allah, when you look at the speech of Allah, from the time you touch it to the time that you touch it to put it back where you had brought it down from, your air is of one of respect. Your air is one of humility. Your air is one, if you've ever seen, there's some photos that they have where you'll see at the Salahi Masjid, there's a massive mushaf there. And you see men bringing it down all together from the shelf. And if you see, these are grown men, big strapping young men, how their backs are stooped and how humble they are when they're bringing it down and they're setting it, subhanAllah, you think that they were carrying some type of glass or precious metal because of the respect for the speech of Allah. This is the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that have been given. Now, Brother Kashif, if you could read some from the commentary for us, please.
It is impermissible to write the Qur'an using things that are low or despicable, like the urine of an animal. It is also impermissible to sit on it and other such things. Shaykh Taqiyuddin Ibn Taymiyyah said that there is consensus on this matter and it is compulsory to rub out whatever was written with najasa.
Now think about this now. It's consensus that it's impermissible to sit on the speech of Allah. So anything like this, using it as a rest, as a pillow. You see people sometimes, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, you're in Masjid al-Haram, the most sacred place on earth, you're making tawaf, and you see a man just off from you near the steps, and he's curled up with a mushaf under his arm. And he's there. Some of the people have placed the mushaf on the ground, and I remember being a huge throng of people, and looking over, and seeing, wait a minute, hold on, it can't be that someone's placed the mushaf there. There are people making tawaf. Now you know the possibility exists, it could get kicked. This is the type of thing. You must understand, if anyone with purposeful intent kicks, sits on, urinates on, throws, or uses any disrespectful manner towards the Qur'an, this one is a murtad by consensus. He should be killed. And some of the ulama say, we don't even ask him to repent. We kill him immediately. We don't accept it from him. We don't accept it from him. We kill him immediately. Because if you do this with purposeful intent, it's known that you did this. You knew what this was. It wasn't that you were sitting down at home, you forgot where you put the speech of Allah. You sat on the, oh, subhanAllah, and you stood up. That's not the same thing. You intentionally knew. So for someone to intentionally set it down and then to do tawaf, they know someone's going to come back around and kick it. This is why even in the case of, you had someone once, this was around the 1917, 1918. There was a case that was published in one of the fatwa journals. This man's in Turkey, Istanbul. The Muslims are still in the earth. The earth still was shaking with them. When their armies marched, the earth shook with their power. And one of the people who was a Muslim, he said, "A'tini bimusahif min fadlik." Give me one of the small mushafs. One of the ulama heard him say that. And he came over with some of the others and said, "No, you need to take your shahada again." And they surrounded the man. They said, "Why?" He said, "Because you don't say musahif, small mushaf." He said, "Because there's nothing small about the Qur'an. And there's nothing small in the Qur'an that's been mentioned." That is serious. And the man had to take his shahada. He could have been killed. This is how serious it was. This is when the Muslims were in the earth. They were in the earth in the sense that they were established. They didn't apologize like, maybe he could. No, this was kufr. This is how it was. Today, these people, even people that are doing clear kufr, what can we do, akhi? Just maybe they don't know. They're scared of the kuffar. And this is not permitted for you to be. This is clear. And the speech of Allah is a serious matter. So we want to make sure that we understand this affair. Don't take the speech lightly. Please continue reading, brother.
The Imam Ahmad said, "It is not right that any of the Qur'an should be written with something low in value or despicable." Imam Ibn Aqil said, "It is disliked that it would be written on the walls of masjids, whether as dhikr or otherwise. The reason for this is that it would distract the one that is praying in the masjid."
Right. There's a difference of opinion about this. But please continue.
Imam Ahmad disliked the purchasing of clothes with the dhikr of Allah, the Exalted, etched on it, someone sitting on it or taking it lightly.
Okay, this has to do with purchasing cut off pieces of the kiswah. Again, there's a difference of opinion about this. If they're given away freely, that's different. But Imam Ahmad says you shouldn't purchase it, because it's like purchasing the speech of Allah. And it goes back to that ayah 69, where woe be to those who write the book with their own hands, and then they say this is from Allah, and they've only written by it with their own hands, and look at what they've done. They purchased the speech of Allah for a paltry price. It's this type of language that Imam Ahmad despised. So if it's given away, it's given away. Please continue.
It is also mentioned in Al-Bukhari that with old copies or portions beyond use, that they would burn them out of respect for the speech.
Okay, this is to do with the companions. So when the companions had old mushafs, okay, you sometimes find what are called maqbaratul musahif, mushaf graveyards. And these are places where things that have the speech of Allah on them, there'd be a designated portion in any city where Muslims had dominion over it. Not living there, dominion. Muslims either have dominion or they rule it. There's no middle ground where I just happen to be living in Hyson Green. No, we have dominion in Hyson Green. We control Hyson Green. We happen to control there, and we have designated a section of Hyson Green as a mushaf graveyard. So we go there with the musahif. We respectfully, we don't dig a massive hole, but we make a sort of a mound in the earth that's a depression. And we put them in there, and we burn them. We burn them, respectfully. And this is what people would do, because they're beyond use. But you only use that section for there. You don't use it for garbage, anything else. You use that as a hallowed section for the mushaf. Now, please continue reading.
It is also narrated that Uthman would bury some mushaf between the grave and the mimbar.
This is in Masjid al-Nabawi. He buried some mushafs between the grave and the mimbar of Rasulullah. See, that's respect. That is respect. All right, please continue.
Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal said, if a mushaf should become beyond use, then you should bury it. It is also disliked that someone should stretch his legs towards it or put his back to it, and likewise all the books of knowledge that have any Qur'an in them, as this is a mark of respect. It is also disliked to place it on the ground without any place to put it, nor need that requires that. A man threw the book in front of the Imam Ahmad, and this enraged him. The Imam said, is this how the people of knowledge are to behave? It is disliked to ornament the mushaf with gold and silver, and as Imam Az-Zaruni said, it is impermissible to write it with gold, as this is ornamented the mushafs, and this was prophesied. If this happens, one should take off the gold and give it as zakat, And if this is intermingled, one should write over it using a more humble substance. Imam Mahfuz al-Kalwadani said, if someone has put gold in the Qur'an and can take it off, the gold should be given as zakat, and this should be removed and measured. It is also impermissible to ornament the books of knowledge in the same way as we discussed ornamenting the Qur'an, although it is permissible to send the Mus'haf, and was considered praiseworthy by Imam al-Amidi for doing that.
Okay, now, it's permissible to send the Mus'haf. Okay? So if someone should want to send the Mus'haf, where they take a very small portion and they want to scent it, wipe off the main liquid portions, but you run your hands along the top of it and along the spine very gently, so you don't rub off anything, and you should be able to smell the scent. Yeah? See? It's past muster. You should be able to smell the scent on the Mus'haf. Another way that Mus'hafs are scented, and it's one thing that I've always asked Allah to reward our brothers in India and Pakistan for, is they have a habit of stocking the Mus'hafs just above or somewhere near incense. Because when you open the Mus'hafs, they always smell like agarbati incense. Have you noticed that? When you open them, and I don't know whether that was accidental or whether they just do that, but that's out of, alhamdulillah, Allah reward those brothers, because when you open the Mus'haf, you always associate it with good smells. So if you burn incense in your house and the incense travels up and it intermingles with the pages of the speech of Allah, this is good. It's a good thing to scent it. This is good. Because the Prophet ﷺ would have the people scent the masjid. He used to have them give scent, and burn scent in the masjid. Okay? Now, our final portion is, it is also valid to kiss it, and writing to the unbelievers using 2 ayat or less for admonition. Okay. Now, in commentary of this, so it is praiseworthy to perfume the Mus'haf as the Prophet ﷺ perfumed the Kaaba and what was besides that of the walls and curtains. Okay, so he used to perfume it, and still to this day this is done. Now, those of you who do not hold the position of the permissibility of touching perfume or such, you need to take warning. The curtains of the Kaaba are perfumed. If you grab the curtains of the Kaaba that have been perfumed, and your position is that this can break your tawaf or have you, you need to find out from your local people what their position is on this, because that will nullify your ihram. The curtains of the Kaaba are most certainly scented. I smelled them when I was making tawaf. They had a beautiful scent coming from them. But as for gripping them and holding them, you need to be careful. If you touch them and they go by on your clothes and some of the scent rubs off, you need to find out if that nullifies ihram. You need to ask your ulama to find out, because it's a serious issue. He also ordered the people to perfume and use incense in the masjids. So the Mus'haf takes more precedence. It is permissible to kiss the Mus'haf without any reservations at all, as this is the way of gaining nearness to Allah. He's making reference to when Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahl, he used to take the Mus'haf down. Remember, this is the son of Abu Jahl. He took the son, this is when he became Muslim. He took the Mus'haf and he kissed it and he touched it to his forehead. And he said, this is the speech of Allah, the speech of my Lord. And none of the companions repudiated him for doing that. Imam Muwafiq al-Din says, this is a form of silent ijma'. So when he did this, then this was permitted. So when someone comes to you and says, oh, you can't do this, say, listen, this is consensus, akhi. You could do kufr, don't do it. Don't say anything against it. You could become a kafir because it's consensus. You must show respect to the Qur'an, and Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahl, he did that. Don't go into kufr, akhi. Follow the evidence. Right? Advise them. It is permissible to kiss the Mus'haf without any reservations at all, as this is the way of gaining nearness to Allah. There's no analogy that enters into this at all. Where there is analogy, then it is not praiseworthy to do an action. Respect and magnification come only by known sources, and because of this, Umar ibn al-Khattab said to the black stone, if I had not seen the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam kiss you, I would not have done so. Ibn Abbas repudiated Muawiyah when he saw him kissing the pillars of the Kaaba one by one, as this was an increase and it was already there. The proof established here is that there is no increase in something that has not been established. Taqiyuddin ibn Taymiyyah said, when the people happen to stand up for one in a gathering, then the Qur'an has more right than that. Okay? So when you look at the presentation where a mushaf is brought down or the Qur'an, someone stands up to get the Qur'an, there's a respect. So Taqiyuddin ibn Taymiyyah, irrespective of how infamous he's seen or whatever else, he said, if you stand up for one another out of respect, oh, this guy's older than me, I stand up for him. This is my granddad, he's older than me. Listen, this is the speech of Allah. This is greater than your granddad. This is the speech of the one who made your granddad. The speech of the one who made your clan, your family, your country, all of these people. It has more respect if you stand up for it. The speech that is contained. It is permitted to write 2 ayat or less than that to the unbelievers for admonition, as it's mentioned in the collection of Abu Bakr al-Afram, that the Prophet ﷺ wrote a letter to the idol worshippers. It is also impermissible to contradict the writing system for the mushaf that was established by Uthman regarding the writing of waw, ya, and alif, and the other particulars. This was specifically mentioned by Imam Ahmad as well. The unbeliever is prevented from touching the mushaf without any difference of opinion and from reading it and owning one. If he should happen to own one by inheritance or other similar matter, then someone should come forward and, if necessary, with force, take ownership from that individual. The individual may look at a copy, but without touching it or carrying it, as mentioned by Al-Qadi Abu Ya'la al-Baghdadi in his text, footnotes. So this is the end of that text. So you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you incur Allah's wrath. Think about it. When you write down ayat, the way that the mushaf, when Uthman wrote it out, most of the musahif are based on that. The vast majority, like you'll find almost none that will be slightly different. If you should happen to copy an ayah into a letter to send it to someone, you should copy it out exactly as it is in the mushaf. Don't deviate from that. Follow that system. And the waw, ya, and alif is to do with the long vowels. They should look exactly as it does in the mushaf. Now we say at the end of this, أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم أستغفر الله إن الله غفور رحيم الحمد الراحمين. Now what I say at the end of all this is, we've now covered through our etiquettes and special circumstances surrounding the speech of Allah, what our etiquette should be. You know what to expect from me, and you know what I will expect of you. You know how hard you're going to have to work, and I know how hard I will have to work. You know that your level of dedication will have to increase, and I know that as well. You know that you have to put in effort, and I know that as well. So what I want to do is, with the remaining time that we have left over, out of everything that we've gone over so far, okay, I want to get any questions from you about that. And then in addition to this, if on the back of those, once we finish those, we will go, because the following day, which is going to be Wednesday, we're going to start our Tajweed text. We're going to start building, inshallah. We're going to start building. The reason why this introduction is so long, I don't want la'na to come upon anyone's head in this class, mine or yours. So it's understood. We already have an understanding of how we should be with the speech of Allah. This should be no mistaking. No mistaking at all. Okay? Now, is there a question over anything we've covered? Yes.
Regarding bearing the Qur'an,
Yes.
would one be able to do it in their own back garden if they chose out a place that's allocated, but they're not sure that whether they could reside there for how long they're going to be residing at that address?
If they did that, that would be permissible for them to do. If they were unsure as to whether or not they were going to reside at that address indefinitely, the safer option would be for them to do the burning. So that way whoever would have possession of that property after them would not inadvertently unbury it, gain access to them, and fling them around and throw them around. At least the ashes would be shown some respect and intermingled with the earth. Yes? Is there another question? Yes?
Regarding, also, you explained about disrespect to the Quran. Previously, we've been to classes where they know if someone going to recite an ayah, and to memorize it. And we never make mistakes, i.e. Guna. And sometimes the Imam, what he does, he marks the Guna area to basically to remind us, this is where you make a mistake, this is where you need to emphasize. Is that allowed?
How the Imam should be marking is, when you have a page, this is the writing. He should make whatever attributions that need to be made in the margins, not the text. Never mark anything on the text. Make it where it's margins, or at the very, very most, you put an underline. This is the ayah where you're screwing up at. Like put an underline, but don't touch the letters, because this is the speech of Allah. So you underline that area. For me, my main issue, at the very most, what I'm going to do is maybe put something in the margins. That's it. Don't underline anything in the speech of Allah. Don't underline anything. Don't put any writing in the speech of Allah. Don't put your name. I'll just put my name on inside. No, you won't. Don't put anything in there. Don't mess with it. Don't touch with it. Don't do anything, because I have to answer for you on the day of judgment. Don't do any of that stuff. Don't leave it alone. I will take charge of whatever needs to be written in the margins. Your job is to just be cool and lay back and just don't touch it. Don't even carry a pencil when it comes to the Muslim. Just don't touch anything, because it just bring you further tribulation, and mainly it'll come to me. So don't do that. So mainly just guard yourself from that. Yeah. Is there another question? Yes.
It was just about what you're talking about, the incense, and is that like a difference of opinion? Like, because obviously, like the smoke of Bakhur and Agarbatti and whatnot. I mean, is that a good thing? Like, it might damage it or whatnot. Do you know what I mean?
No, as long as the mushaf, the agarbat, the smell of incense, will not damage the mushaf as long as it's not directly in front of it. Because then that could lead to inhalation. That could lead, because if paper is directly in front of incense, you catch on fire. But obviously, if it's far enough away where you have it on a shelf and the incense is burning at the bottom, and the smell is wafting up, then that shouldn't be a problem whatsoever. You also have to remember, because the line of thinking you may be headed towards, yes, if you want to burn some here, that's fine. However, we need to also consult, because not every nose is the same, and I don't want there to be brawls and scuffling in class. Bring one by as an experiment. We'll try it out, see how it goes. If people start throwing fresh fruit or complaining, then we can always try a different one or leave it off. But main thing to keep in mind is, yes. Secondly, there was a question that was asked. Now, one of our slaves of Allah has asked about the possibility of us, once we have formally started, to use smaller tables than these that are lower to the ground for the brothers, firstly, to memorize from on the floor, because it just feels better. To which I said, I will speak to the slaves of Allah and ask them, because I'm not going to take any sudden steps and incur any punishment. So I will ask them. I've mainly exempted sisters because they may have different conditions and things that they undergo. If they want to, alhamdulillah, that's fine. But it's up to brothers, because they're the main ones that are sort of situated around the front. If you're fine going lower on the floor, if you've got knee problems, then we'll have to forego that. So it's totally your judgment, right? So that's something we'll have to discuss, but I've thrown it out there for everyone else. For that one brother, I won't mention anyone, honestly, because I don't want to get brothers in trouble. But I've put it out there just so that you have it for your own records. Is there another question? Yes. Yes.
Sheikh, it was mentioned that if somebody hasn't done Hajj, if they've got a resource, then it's kufr.
Yeah.
Is it agreed? Is it a consensus that that person is a kafir?
Okay. If someone has the means to go on Hajj, they have the means, which means they have the wealth, they have the physical ability, they don't have any debts, and the person knows this, and knowingly and without excuse delays Hajj. There was an incident where Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, there were some people who had done the same thing, and he was charging them jizya. And he said, why are you taking money from us? Why are you taking tribute? He said, because you're acting like people of the book, I should treat you as Jews and Christians. So this is an understanding that goes back far, in which the people neglect it without excuse. Obviously, if you have debts, you have dependents, you have a wife and children, you have other things that are absorbing your wealth, and every time you save it, it becomes slightly diminished or depleted, then that's a different matter. But if there's no excuse and you're just hoarding wealth and you don't, you could very well fall under the threat of those ulama. That's a serious matter.
Is it just true for fara'id or sunnah as well?
It's fara'id, because sunnah actions are actions that sometimes are left if they cannot be sustained because of any type of issue. But the fara'id and wajibat are things that must be contained for an action to be valid, or for an action that needs to be fulfilled. And Allah has a right on the slave to have that hajj once in your life. And you don't want to keep putting it off. Yes?
It was in regards to the graveyard mushafs that you were talking about.
Yes.
Do you know, like, say for instance, if you had like Qur'an ayat that you copied as part of like a daween or something like this, and once not needed anymore, and disposing of it. I mean, I thought burial would have been the best thing to do rather than actually burn the Qur'an ayats. Is there like a difference in opinion in regards to whether burning is allowed or not?
No, because Uthman burned mushafs. And he buried them. He did both. He both burned them and buried them.
So burning is permissible?
Yeah, it's permissible. But it depends on how it's being done. If it's done where, what you'll find is people would bury them, and then they'd place a layer of soil on top of them, and then they would burn that. So that way, it's burning and there's soil on top of it, and the fire, after burning what its fuel was, gradually, because of the dirt and everything else, fizzles out by itself. So there's a respect that's done, as long as it's done respectfully. You don't keep sort of stoking the fire and saying, "Oh, I think I see a page," and keep stoking. That's disrespectful. That could actually be kufr. If it's something that would normally be permissible, could become a kufr because of how it's being perceived or done. Yes. All right. Yes.
If you do have a copy of the Qur'an and it's like it's not in a state of reading, would it be better if you kept it for barakah, or would it be better if you buried it?
If you kept it for barakah, that's perfectly permissible. As long as you keep it, try to repair the spine, keep it in a working order, read from it, use it. But it's where it becomes beyond use to where it's actually falling apart, or the pages become very blurred, or they become stained over time, or it's falling apart. Things like this where you cannot repair it. These would be issues where you commit it to a graveyard. Yes, brother?
Earlier on in the text you said listening to music will affect the memorization.
Yes.
What about if you're working in a working environment with this kuffar and you've got no control over it and they play music?
Right.
And how would you?
Okay. It depends on the circumstances. Let's say if you have a warehouse job, I worked 2 warehouse jobs, and I heard everything and all of what I didn't want to hear and what I simply couldn't bear to hear. So what I did is I came in, and I always have headgear, and I would have headphones in, and I'd have my amama wrapped, and I'd be stacking boxes and working, and I'm getting everything done and doing what I'm supposed to do. That's one option if you're working in a warehouse or environment like that. If you're working in more of an office environment where doing such a thing would not be possible, you have 2 options. You could either seek to get the volume reduced so its impact is not as discernible, or you could try to seek a way of, if you can speak to other like-minded people who aren't even Muslims, to say, what do you think about this stuff that's going on? This is absolutely blaring. And other people who might not even be Muslims say, yes, I'm sick of it. It's disgusting. Every time I'm hearing the same songs every day in, day out. I'm sick of it. And then you gather a sort of a grassroots little movement and you get it turned off, get it shut off. So you have those options to think about. Otherwise, what you have to do is just make sure to just do a lot of dhikr if you can't get out of the circumstance, and just to try to protect yourself. Because honestly, those things, once they keep going, there's always that little bit that's with you. And one of the places I worked at as a janitor, they used to play Muzak. And I'd be driving home in my car, and Allah help me, but sometimes I used to come out with one of those little jingles, and I'm thinking, what am I doing, man? I'm driving home. If this, if my mother was in the car with me, it just would have been one of those big right hands or one of those big lefts across the face. What are you doing? But it's something that, because it's been planted in you over time, you hear something hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. This is why, if you notice, and I'll say this very quickly, the top 100 or top 10, how do things get to top 1? Number 1 hits, number 2 hits, number 3 hits, by constant radio play. They understand hifz, they understand tajweed, they understand constant repetition. so many times a day, blank song is played 50 times a day. So even if you hated it before, yeah, when I first I couldn't stand it, now I just love it. Of course you do, you dunce, because it's been played 50 times, you keep hearing it. That initial time you didn't like it, but now, yeah, after 50 times you get tortured with it, yeah, you love it. Of course, that's with anything. Eat these Brussels sprouts. I hate Brussels sprouts. After the 50th, 60th, 70th time. Or if you get starved, and that's the first thing you eat, you're loving life, I'll eat anything. So you see, you have to think about all these things, that there's a purpose behind it. Music has its purposes behind it, and it's to distract people from the speech of Allah. Is there a final question? Yes.
As obviously regarding wudu, there's a lot all these smartphones now, okay, and people touch the Qur'ans with on smartphones, and also the second one is you have translations in the Qur'an as well. What's the ruling on that?
Translations are not Qur'an. Translations are translations, so they don't fall.
You've got Qur'an,
Yeah.
complete Qur'an on one side, and the translation
Yeah.
on the other.
It's not going to affect anything.
Okay.
Just don't touch that. Secondly, with regards to smartphones, you're not actually touching the mushaf as if you're holding a board or something like that. Just don't touch the text. You're fine. Otherwise, just don't touch text. Yes?
Sorry, it's kind of like a linking question to that one. Do you know Sat, I was reading Surah Yasin in the Pakistani version. And do you know like the word a'nakihim, or something like this, is spelled differently in the Arabic one than it is done in the Urdu one.
Yeah. Follow the mushaf of Uthman.
But in terms of that, I mean, how is that one permissible then? Because
Follow the mushaf of Uthman. The mushaf I'm going to give you, follow that. Follow the mushaf of Uthman. If you find any differences or what have you, the mushaf I'm going to give you, follow that one. Don't follow anything else. That's the best short answer I can give you. Okay, so we'll stop from today, inshallah. You're at 6:52. I've given you 8 extra minutes off, okay? Because I'm feeling good today. So what I would say is, take this time, be prepared and be attuned. We're going to be starting fresh, all right? Have some water, things like that before you come in on the day. Have some water. On the day, have some water. And just try to loosen up your mouths, because when we start reciting, we use your whole mouth. قل قولي هذا استغفر الله لي ولكم استغفر الله إن الله غفور رحيم يا السلام عليكم.